What's going on YouTube? Hemoplasm here, and today we've got a secret mission. It starts with a slate called Secret Outpost, dropped from random spacers. When you read this slate, you'll get a mission called the Mantis. It'll ask you to go to the Denebula system to visit planet Denebula 1b. It's fairly close to Alpha Centauri, so it's pretty easy to find. I showed a video here. It's marked as a level 30 zone, but just make sure you're stocked up on trauma kits, med kits, or emergency kits, and you should make pretty quick work of it. Luckily, I found a pretty cool Varun pistol that made short work of most of the enemies here too, and trust me, there's more than a few. This mission is going to net you some pretty gnarly legendary armor and a free ship that's a substantial upgrade to the starter ship that you get. When you land on the planet, you're going to be confronted by some spacers. They're basically going to tell you that this is their hull and you need to leave, otherwise they're going to shoot you. But we're going to ignore that and start blasting these nerds anyway. There's more than a few here, so just make sure you're checking all the dead bodies. I do notice that there's more loot here. I'm not sure if it was intentional, but regardless, go in with plenty of carry weight and don't be like me and get over encumbered. I found so many legendaries that I ended up leaving with a carry weight of something like 700. Just keep following the objective markers. I stopped to scan here. More enemies. Now when you enter the complex and you approach this door, your objective is going to update. The only updates that it's showing is basically the holotapes, or slates, sorry, Fallout, that are going to give you some lore drops. I do recommend picking them up because the lore of the character is pretty interesting. Can be a space vigilante that takes out spacers. But there's only really one that's super important. It'll be coming up here shortly. And then the little messages on the intercom, also lore drops. I recommend looking out for them. There's no objective for them, and you don't really get anything for doing it, but it's cool to flesh out the character. Now here, don't be like me and detonate every single explosive on yourself. They do hurt, as you can tell. This is the slate that we actually need. It's the Seek Semper Tyrannis slate. John Wilkes Booth quote, interesting choice. But we need to remember Tyrannus from this whole thing here. It'll come in handy for a puzzle later in the encounter. This next room here is the one that gave me some trouble. I think it was just the layout of the enemies, but they kind of spread out weird. Just take your time with it. And now we're introduced to the NPC Livy. He's basically just going to beg for his life after he just watched you dispatch all of his spacer friends. He says he has the answer to this secret in the next room, the little trap. He doesn't, but he says that he does. I chose to spare him here. I'm pretty sure whichever choice you make doesn't affect his fate at all, but you'll get to see how it played out in mine. And now we approach the trap room. Remember that slate with the John Wilkes Booth quote on it I mentioned earlier? Tyrannus is the operative word, but before you step on any panel, I would recommend strongly that you quick save, because if you step on the wrong panel, there are 2 laser guns that are going to tear you to ribbons. But if you have a quick save, it shouldn't be a problem. And you can see here that I accidentally stepped on one of the panels, and got blasted. My time walking real slow because, again, I was a dummy and got over encumbered. But you just have to spell out Tyrannus. Pretty straightforward. Alright, now that you've cleared that, there's just a button right next to the door. You just push that, opens the door, and Livy the Rat will start following you. In this next part here, there is a laser turret overhead. Just make sure you shoot that down. It's not too much of a threat. The next part, though, it's filled with robots. I found that the robots did more damage than the spacers and also were able to take a lot more damage. So just make sure you still have some med kits handy, and you should be fine. Another intercom on the wall for another lore drop. This is the room where Livy meets his fate. Essentially, while you're battling the robots, you'll hear Livy start saying, "Hey, now the treasure's mine." All he's done is lock you out of the door, but he can't figure out how to turn off the mechanism, so he accidentally unalives himself. Just desserts if you ask me. This next area you'll see me switch weapons a couple of times. I don't know why, but these robots were particularly tanky for me. Luckily I had enough medkits on hand. I switched to a minigun. The minigun barely touches them. I end up using a very punchy shotgun, and that makes pretty quick work of them. And then we just have 2 things left to do after that. Now you're just following your objective marker to the switch. That switch is going to take the Mantis ship up to the surface. And then you'll get another objective marker to claim your Mantis set of armor. Not much loot in this room, at least none that I could find. Maybe a more thorough search probably would have yielded something, but I didn't see anything worthwhile. And here we are, the room with the Mantis armor. Go ahead and loot that off the mannequin. And in this same room, it's worth noting that in that hexagonal chest, I think it's a hexagon, there is a lore book that is for an NPC in Aquila. It's called the Original Aquila City Charter. If you hand that to her later down the line, it'll just be handy. Just make sure you loot. And here on display, we have the full set of Mantis armor. It's got some pretty good legendary effects. It is also worth noting that you will have another objective marker to go to the ship. That's the free ship. I didn't show that in the video just because I wanted to leave some surprise, but the Mantis armor is more than worth grabbing. As you can see, the legendary effects are pretty useful, and if you're early game, it's going to be a crazy turning point for you. Plus, I think it's pretty cool to look like the Predator.